Before you scroll down or swipe away, pause for just a few seconds, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a doorway, a flame waiting to be stirred, a journey back toward the ancestors, where there were no cities, no phones, no written words, only people, the wild world and instinct. If you love history, if you're drawn to mysteries without language, if you've ever longed to understand yourself more deeply, hit follow now, because what is raw, fierce, and breathtakingly human all lies ahead. And when you're ready, we begin. Close your eyes. Hear the wind whisper through ancient branches. Smell the faint smoke of last night's fire. Feel the cold ground beneath your bare feet. You are living 30,000 years ago. The night is never truly quiet. Inside a cave, carved deep into the side of a forgotten mountain, nestled in an old-growth forest, a faint light flickers. The ashes pulse with orange glow, like a slow, steady heartbeat. Smoke lingers against the damp stone. A figure stirs under a blanket of animal hide. A woman, 35 years old, her hair tangled with soot, her back curved from years of hunting and birthing. Here, 35 is a lifetime. She leans forward, fingers moving through the ashes. They search for the ember still warm and gently place over it a tuft of dry grass, shreds of bark and strips of moss gathered and dried the day before. A slow breath. No sound, just patience and breath. A flame flutters into being. A small tongue of fire dances in the dark. She doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. Keeping the fire alive is a given, like keeping the soul of the group breathing. Behind her, a child wheezes in sleep, curled against its mother. An elder man lies hunched beside a makeshift wooden rack for tools. Men, women, children, all scattered through the cave, and yet arranged by an invisible rhythm passed down through time. A bird sings, faint and far. The sky isn't light yet, but the dark has begun to lift. Morning's chill slips into the cave mouth. A girl, maybe 10 years old, is the first to step outside. She holds a bundle of stiffened hide, a dried animal bladder within used for carrying water. She stands silently at the cave's edge, staring into the fog-wrapped forest, where tree silhouettes stretch upward into the pale, growing light. Her task is to watch for movement, a deer, a bear, or worse, something nameless. Movement means signal, and signal means choice. Deeper inside, a man sharpens a stone blade. Each pull against the whetstone hisses, cold and dry. His hands are rough but fluid, as though he were shaping water. This is the girl's father. No words are exchanged, none are needed. Morning is for quiet. There's no breakfast as we know it. One woman hands her daughter a boiled root from yesterday. The girl chews it like earth. A boy clutches a pouch of roasted seeds, chewing slowly as though counting. Another removes a strip of meat from the embers. Hard as bark, but still edible. They do not eat to be full, they eat to continue. This morning is not like the others. 3 days ago, the stream nearby began to shift. The water turned still and muddy. The fish vanished. The birds changed course. Deer prints faded. Last night, the oldest among them, the toothless woman with eyes like buried stone, said the moss on the rocks had turned too early. The season was changing, which means this place will no longer feed them. They have to leave, but not yet. They must prepare. The fire must be packed, food must be carried, and above all, they need a hunt. 5 are chosen. 3 men, 2 women, all swift, all proven. One bears a scar that runs from jaw to shoulder. No one asks. All nod. They know the trails, the wind, the prey, and they know that if tomorrow finds them still here, hunger will not forgive. The firekeeper hands them a bundle wrapped in bark and hide. Inside, a glowing ember smoulders. They will carry this with them, feeding it along the way, to spark warmth when the night falls again. It is the flame of ancestors. It has burned longer than all of them combined. 4 others set out to gather. Children join, not to play, but to learn. They will search for roots, bark, wild seeds, and if lucky, a few berries that have clung on after the last rain. Nothing is trivial. Every edible leaf is a day lived. Every fat worm beneath a rotted log is a replenishment of blood. In the cave, the remaining begin their silent tasks. An old woman grinds ochre into fine dust with a stone, mixing it with saliva. She paints. No one asks why. They all know. There is no writing, but there are images. And in the images, souls, memory, story. By evening the fire may blaze bright, meat may sizzle, or it may not. It depends on whether the deer appears. It depends on whether those who left return with prey, or only a blood-stained spear. No one in the hunting group speaks as they leave the cave. They move like wind, threading through trees, soft, deliberate, and without pause. Every step is chosen, each shift of weight considered. The silence between them is not absence, it is language. They don't walk in a line, they flow. The man in front isn't a leader, he simply sees best in morning light. The woman behind isn't weakest, she hears better than any of them. Each brings something vital, each watches, listens, smells. The forest speaks, and they are fluent. There are no maps, no tools for direction, but each twist in the riverbed, each moss-covered rock, every bent tree branch is etched into memory. That small rise to the left, that's where the boar once nested in spring. The half-dead pine ahead, that's where the bear marked its return. Their landscape isn't navigated, it's remembered. Then, a sign, deer scat, still damp, a crushed patch of moss. One of them squats, presses 2 fingers into the soil, brings the scent to his nose, nods, close, very close. They split without words. 3 curve left, uphill, 2 circle right, keeping low. Spears ready, eyes wide, breathing deep but slow. The deer doesn't know it yet, but death is already closing in from both sides. Miles away, where the canopy breaks into a grove of thin trees and underbrush, the gathering party begins their work. It is just as vital as the hunt. Often, it is more successful. A young girl gently peels back a mat of wet leaves. Beneath it, writhing larvae, pale and plump. Protein. Her mother nods in approval, dropping them into a sack. Another woman kneels, pulling a root from soft mud. Its skin peels easily, edible. She tastes the bitter flesh and spits. Not this one, not raw. It'll need cooking or it'll burn your belly. They move slowly, carefully, no wasted motion. Every plant is examined, every bark and mushroom inspected. Death hides in beauty out here, and so does life. One boy watches as an elder woman scrapes the bark of a tree and grinds it with her stone. She mixes the dust with water, smearing it on a shallow wound. It burns. That means it works. No one here is a doctor, but knowledge runs deep, passed down not through books, but through skin, pain, and repetition. This plant calms fever. That one clots blood. This root, never touch it. Once it killed a man in a half day. Back in the cave, the fire has grown. It isn't large, just enough to warm, to cook, to hold the dark at bay. A child plays with a stick, drawing circles in the ash. An elder woman continues her painting on the stone wall, her lines sure and slow. A handprint, a bison, a spiral. A boy watches. He says nothing, just watches. She doesn't teach, she does. And in doing, she teaches. Knowledge here lives in muscle, in gaze, in silence. Then movement, a crack of branches, a shift of air. Someone looks up. From the woods, 5 silhouettes emerge. 4 upright, 1 draped across 2 sets of shoulders, long legs, limp neck. A deer, fresh, small, but enough. No one claps, no one cheers. They meet each other's eyes. One man raises a brow, another nods once. That's enough. They succeeded. The oldest among them approaches first. He places one hand gently on the deer's forehead. His eyes close. No chant, no prayer. Just a moment. Acknowledgement. This life ends so another may go on. They lay the animal out on a flat stone. The work begins immediately. The hide comes first. 2 quick cuts behind the knees, then a steady pull. The sinew pops, the blood runs, the warmth fades. The blade is sharp, and the hands know the way. This is not the first deer, it will not be the last. Every part has a purpose. The meat will be divided, some to eat now, roasted quickly over flame, some to dry, salted with ash, left on heated stone. The organs, liver, heart, consumed warm, the bones broken later for marrow, the tendons set aside for bowstrings and sewing. Even the bladder, cleaned, may carry water. There is no waste, only transformation. By midday, the sun rises above the trees. The scent of firewood and meat thickens the air. Children laugh. A few chase each other around the stone ledge. The elderly nap with mouths slightly open, backs leaned against warm stone. A woman repairs a tear in a hide using bone needle and sinew thread. A man reshapes the edge of his flint tool, 1 chip at a time. Precision is survival, and amidst it all, no one speaks of tomorrow. No one says, "When will we move?" They already know. When the wind changes, when the cold arrives too fast, when the river no longer sings, they will leave, and when they do, they will not look back. The slanting light of evening stretches across the clearing before the cave, bathing moving bodies in amber and firelight. No one rushes, no one commands. Each person knows their role, and work unfolds like a silent chant. Ancient, practiced, uninterrupted. The meat has been portioned. Most now hangs from a wooden frame, just beyond the cave's mouth, where wind and sun will dry each strip in time. Some lies across flat stones, slowly roasting over the embers. The fat sizzles and hisses, its scent curling into the air, mingling with smoke and tree resin. A small child steps closer, wide eyes fixed on the roasting flesh. He clutches a stick, hesitant, pointing at the food. The woman tending the fire nods. He sits, cross-legged, silent, entranced, as if watching something sacred. And to him, it is. Further off, a young man sharpens the same blade used to gut the deer. Tiny flakes of stone scatter like silver sparks in the fading sun. He doesn't speak, doesn't think. He just works. These movements live in the muscles, not the mind. That blade may be needed again tomorrow, perhaps for something larger. Near the cave mouth, the elder who paints rests her hands. She watches the forest, her clouded eyes deep and unmoving. Behind her, the wall holds a new image. Another deer, legs stretched in flight, its head turned in mid-run. Around it, a ring of dots marks tracks, and through the heart a single straight line, a spear. Children gather where reverent. No one asks what it means, they understand. The drawing isn't decoration, it's memory, it's proof. This day happened. This hunt was real. A younger woman sits weaving a basket from thin reeds. Her fingers dance through the strands, pulling them tight. Fresh sinew from the deer is laid beside her, drying. It will be braided into bowstrings, laces, ties. Everything must be ready before the first step into unknown ground is taken. A burst of laughter. One child trips over the edge of the ash pit and stumbles, landing in a soft sprawl. The others laugh, not with cruelty, but release. A moment of joy. The adults glance but do not intervene. Children learn through bruises, just as they once did. The sky shifts fast now, from soft jade to violet. A single blaze of orange burns along the western clouds, like fire on the horizon. Someone begins to gather wood. Night's fire must be prepared before the last light disappears. Another heads for the stream, filling a hide bladder with water, hanging it from a branch to settle the grit. Inside the cave, hides are unrolled and laid flat. The softest spots are reserved for the oldest and youngest, closer to the fire, those with wounds, with aches, with pain still mending. No one is cast aside. No one is useless. A bent old man who can braid the strongest knot or sense the coming rain by the taste of air. He matters as much as the swiftest spear thrower. A pregnant woman shifts her weight near the back wall, bracing her spine with a grunt. She has said little all day. Her belly is taut, high. Maybe weeks remain, maybe less. The painter has already sewn a pouch of soft hide. No one mentions the child, but everyone is ready. Above, the first stars appear. No one looks up, but they all know. A sound begins. A tap. Soft bone against stone, a slow, steady beat, primitive percussion. One child mimics with two small rocks, and then someone hums, low, wavering, wordless, like wind in a hollow log. There is no melody, no lyrics, but there is rhythm, there is sound, there is feeling. Night comes. No one announces it, but all feel it, and as the fire dances, the most sacred thing remains unbroken. They are still alive. They are still here. They are still breathing. And if tomorrow comes, it will become one more strand in this long, unwritten story they carry with them in silence. Night draped over the forest like a heavy black blanket. There were no lamps, no artificial glow, only fire, flickering, shrinking, pulsing like a living thing. And around it, shadows, sitting, lying, curling, breathing softly, listening, watching. The soft crackling of burning wood blended with the shallow breaths of people and creatures. Someone sniffled in sleep. A child stirred in a dream, kicking the air before curling back into their mother's side. The man tending the fire pulled another dry log from the pile, poking at the embers just enough to keep the flame alive. He said nothing, didn't feel tired, didn't think much. Watching the fire was a task, and also the only true solitude left. Above, the sky was thick with stars. No one counted, no one named them, but some stars were known by everyone. The one that rose when the hunt began, the one that marked the first frost. Some believed their ancestors looked down through them. Others believed nothing at all, but when they looked up, something always stirred inside. One man rose, spear in hand, and stepped beyond the ring of fire. No one asked where he was going, but they all knew. He had heard something, a sound, a scent, a shift. He moved like a shadow among trees. If danger was coming, he would be the first to meet it. If the wind had turned, he would be the one to warn them. The pregnant woman remained awake. She lay on her side, one hand on her belly, her eyes wide open in the dark. Not afraid, not anxious, just awake. The life inside her shifted, a flutter, a stretch. It too was listening. It too was learning, even before it saw sunlight. The oldest among them did not sleep anymore. Sleep for him had become like dry season wind, rare, thin, and never enough. He sat, tracing the dirt with a burned stick, not painting, just lines. But each line meant something. He remembered what others had forgotten. Closer to dawn, the fire faded. Its light dimmed to a faint red, like the slow blinking of some animal's eye. The fire watcher murmured and nudged the boy who would take his place. The boy stirred, groggy, crawled to the fire. Before lying down, the older man rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, a quiet, warm gesture. The boy added bark, moss. The wind shifted, the flame flickered, but it stayed alive. That was enough. Far in the forest, a howl, not loud, not close, but clear. A wolf, maybe calling its pack, maybe marking its space. No one woke, no one worried. That sound had echoed through the trees for thousands of years, and humans had survived them all. Inside the cave, a young man dreamed of fire. It spread through the forest, swallowed trees and sky. He turned in his sleep, sweat forming along his brow. He muttered something in a language no one truly spoke anymore, maybe something ancient, or something only born in dreams. A woman nearby opened her eyes, listened a while, then turned away. As the sky began to pale to grey, dew gathered on every leaf. The first hint of light hovered behind the trees, as though the sun was uncertain whether to rise. The first to wake was the same woman who had kept the fire days ago. She sat up, bent forward, dug into the ash with her fingers, searching for a warm ember. There was none. The night had been colder than expected. She exhaled softly and reached into a small pouch of saved ash and coals. She rebuilt from what was kept. The flame returned slowly. She cupped it, breathed gently. The man who had dreamt of burning trees opened his eyes. He watched the fire in silence, blinking, then sighed. Today they would leave. The sun was rising. The earth was changing. They could not stay. But before they went, there was something to do, a sign left on the wall. One of the young ones was chosen. His palm was pressed in ash and pigment, then placed beside the deer painting, a mark, a statement. We were here. No one said goodbye, but all understood. This place, the fire, the smoke, the pictures, the wind, it would become memory. Another layer in the long, unwritten journey. They began to pack, quiet, unhurried, but final, because the forest was waking. And today they had to move forward. They left the cave as the sun crested the horizon, its first light weak and dappled through mist that clung to every leaf and blade of grass. There was no ceremony, no mourning, no goodbyes. The departure unfolded the way it always had. For countless generations, when the land no longer gave, when the river no longer whispered, when the tracks dried up, you moved. At the front walked a man who had survived more winters than any other living in the group. He wasn't the fastest, but his steps were steady, and his eyes could read the earth like words. The youngest boy rode on his mother's back. The pregnant woman stayed at the center of the group, shielded on all sides by others who made themselves her barrier. The elders walked along the softer edges of the trail, where the ground offered fewer roots and stones. The group moved like a river, not swift, but never still. Each person carried something, a pouch of seeds, a bundle of dry roots, a twist of sinew rope, a smoldering ember wrapped in ash and bark, bound tight in hide, tied to the waist. Every object was chosen for survival, nothing frivolous. What did not help you live was left behind. Their footprints pressed into the damp soil, each step a quiet declaration, we were here. But soon the wind would sweep in, the dew would dry, the rain would fall, and all traces would vanish, leaving only memory behind in the eyes of those who followed. They crossed a wide meadow, its grass low and wind-whipped, each gust like cold fingers on the skin. A man raised his hand. The group halted. No one asked why. Silence became attention. He inhaled deeply. A scent, not animal, not human, rotting, damp, char. A wanderer, another band, a carcass. They shifted course, no debate. Safety required no explanations. A child woke mid-stride, blinking, but did not cry. He leaned again into his mother's shoulder, eyes drifting shut. They followed a shallow trail, muddied and rutted. Old deer prints ghosted along its sides. A woman at the rear knelt, dipped her fingers into a puddle, and tasted the soil. Salty, not blood, but drying earth, the coming drought. She looked to the man at the front. He adjusted course without a word. No one issued orders, no one sought permission. A glance was enough. By midday, they paused beneath a wide-branched tree. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft golden strands. A fire was lit from the ember carried since morning. Two children munched roasted seeds mixed with berries. An elder gnawed a root, his gaze lost to distance. One of the younger men climbed a tree, not tall but high enough. He saw no animals, but a thin wisp of smoke curled in the distance, bending and rising into the sky. Someone was burning something. Another group? A threat? Or perhaps simply another family on their own path? He climbed down, said nothing, but the group already knew they would turn left, into thicker woods, harder walking, but safer. By late afternoon the air thickened, cold began to slip between fingers and under collars. One woman laid out bundles of dried grass to soften the ground. The children were fed early. The elders gathered near the fire, low and flickering. Someone began to speak, not loudly, not dramatically, just a story. It wasn't joyful, it wasn't tragic, it was simply real. A hunt, a death, a rescue, a scar. The voice rose and fell like wind through reeds. No one interrupted, no one clapped, but everyone listened. The fire sank lower. The ground cooled. Bodies curled in hides, pressed close together. One person blew a final breath over the coals, preserving a single glow. Above them the sky exploded in stars. No one looked, but every dream was lit with those same quiet lights. The first day of the new journey ended. No drums, no fanfare, only wind whispering across the backs of sleepers, and a silent promise. Tomorrow we will still be here, and we will keep going. Morning didn't arrive with light, but with the quiet rustle of limbs shifting beneath furs, the cold breath against bare skin, the soft fluttering of birds landing on brittle branches overhead. And then the pale grey light emerged between the trees like a whisper. No one called others awake. Those who could stirred, those who didn't yet would. Rest was never enough. But no one complained. Their bodies had long accepted being woken by dull aches in their knees, in their necks, in their empty stomachs. The firekeeper from yesterday was already digging through the ashes. A small red ember still clung to life beneath the cooling black. She fed it dried grass, breathed gently. Once again, fire lived. No one praised her. No one needed to. If the fire lived, they all lived. Breakfast was simple. A strip of softened meat, a pinch of crushed seeds, a few berries divided carefully by thumb and forefinger. One man chewed a bitter root, rubbing his stomach. An elder gave a child an old piece of hide to chew, something to ease the hunger he couldn't name yet. The man who had led the day before checked his feet. No swelling, no soreness. He crouched, pressed 2 fingers into the earth and brought them to his nose, still damp, still rich. They were a few hours from clean water, but there was no rush. Every stretch of ground had to be read before it was walked. When the sun climbed high enough to pierce the forest floor, they moved again. Today wasn't just for walking, it was for reading signs. A new place couldn't just have water and trees. It needed shelter, wind in the right direction, signs of life, animals, birds, insects. Nothing was too small to matter. A young girl spotted it first, a fresh scratch on a tree. Not deep but new, not deer, not bear, possibly lynx. A woman beside her pulled the child's hair back gently, looked into her eyes for a heartbeat, confirmation. Then the group shifted direction. They crossed through damp woods where fallen leaves rose nearly to the calves. Every step whispered, no one complained. This was mushroom ground. One man stopped, knelt beside a rotting log, a cluster of thick-stemmed white caps with a pungent scent. He sliced off a bit, touched it to his tongue. Bitter, not poisonous. He nodded, others gathered. These would be boiled with roots, harsh to taste, good for the belly. By midday, something greater appeared. Water. Not a river, but a stream, clear and shallow, running beneath stones flecked with moss. Deer tracks faded along the banks. A bird burst from a nearby bush. A man knelt, cupped water in his hand, drank. Safe. The leader scratched a circle into the dirt with a stick. This was it, their first real stop since leaving. Not permanent, not yet, but a pause. A chance to see what the land would offer. Shelters were raised quickly with fallen limbs and hide. Fires were lit again, this time with intention to last. A man and a teenage boy broke off from the group, spears in hand, following the stream, looking for fish. Crayfish. If they were lucky, boar. Those who stayed began their work. A woman constructed a snare from sinew and bent branches. An elder stripped bark, carving a new pestle from its core. Children were given the task of finding round, hard stones for pounding roots. Afternoon drifted into the sound of hushed laughter, the scrape of knives over hide, the crack of roots splitting, the eternal trickle of water over rock. No one spoke loudly, But the silence was not stillness. It was the heartbeat of something living, a body made of people and tasks and fire. Just before dusk, the hunters returned. No large kill, but 2 fish, one small, one modest. A fallen bird's nest with 3 unbroken eggs, not a victory but food. Another day of life, a reason to stay. The fire cracked. A branch burst, popping like applause. A child giggled. Someone began a story about an old stream, a white deer seen 3 times, and then never again. The children listened with their bodies. The adults listened with memory. The elders listened with silence. Above them, stars returned like drops of light pouring from a hidden sky. Night fell again, and still they were here. There was fire, there was warmth, there were stories, there was life, there was hope, and there was still road ahead. The 3rd morning didn't begin with birdsong, but with the soft whisper of rain, gentle, steady, falling through the thick canopy above. Not a storm, not a downpour, just a cool mist that soaked leaves, branches, shoulders, brows, rain that slipped down collars and dripped quietly onto sleeping furs. The children woke first, not by choice, but because the water found their bare feet. One child whimpered, not loudly, just enough to stir the mother beside him. She drew the little one closer, wrapping them both tighter in hide. The father reached out, caught a droplet on his fingers and sniffed it. Clean, no thunder, no wind, just soft, living rain. One by one, the others stirred. The fire was checked, its heart still warm. A bit of dried grass, bark, and breath brought it back. Smoke rose, mingling with mist, forming a low cloud inside their shelter that made it seem like the cave was breathing again. Breakfast was even more meager than usual. Soaked wild grains from the night before. A few mushrooms left from yesterday, split bird eggs roasted gently. A man drew circles into the wet earth with a stick, tracking days, not with numbers but symbols. A kind of memory carved into mud. A small group left early to follow the stream. They carried empty hide sacks, wooden spears, and nets woven from grasses. Their goal was fish, but they would watch for other signs. Prints, scat, bark stripped from trees. Anything alive. Back at the camp, the others got to work. A woman re-wove the shelter's roof using sinew and branches. An older man carved new meat hooks from fallen limbs. The children were sent to collect wide leaves for bedding, to raise them from the wet ground. They moved in pairs, communicating in hushed whispers and hand signs, as if enacting some ancient ritual of play and purpose. A young woman sat against a tree, pulling tangles from her hair and braiding them into cords. She once made bowstrings for her old group, before drought scattered them. She no longer had a bow, but her hands remembered. The cords would serve a bow again, in another place, another future. By midday the rain still hadn't stopped, but no one hid, no one paused. Their skin knew wetness like breath. Makeshift tarps shielded the fire, kept the food dry, protected the tools in progress. The hunters returned with a quiet prize, a squirrel snared near the trail, and a small sack of streamfish, 5 in all, soft-boned and silver. There were no cheers, just something in the eyes. Eased tension, subtle relief. Someone whispered, "Good." That was enough. Later, someone skinned the squirrel to make a pouch. The meat was cooked, the bones simmered for broth. A child was given the head, offered like a gift. He smiled, the only smile that day. When the sun dipped behind thick clouds, the group gathered again by the fire. One man pulled something from his pouch, a carved sliver of bone, etched with notches and ancient lines. No one remembered who made it, but it had traveled with them longer than most memories. He placed it on a flat stone and began to speak. Tonight's story was of a man lost in fog who met a saber-toothed cat. No one knew if it was truth or tale, but everyone watched. Some stared into the flames, some half smiled, others pulled their hides tighter. Night fell without warning. Rain softened. The wind shifted. The fire burned deeper, turning from yellow to deep red. An elder dozed off where he sat. A child curled against her sister. A young woman closed her eyes, still clutching her flint knife. Above, the sky was hidden, no stars tonight. But no one feared. The fire was alive. Their bodies were warm. The stories had been told, and tomorrow, whether sun or storm, feast or hunger, stillness or journey, they would remain a group, they would remain human. And for now, that was enough. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, but the earth still held its memory damp, dark and quiet, as if the forest itself were waiting. Morning arrived not with bird song or breeze, but with a deeper silence. Leaves fell softly to the ground, making almost no sound. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. The first to wake was the young man who had hunted the day before. He hadn't really slept. In his dream, he saw the eye of a creature, large, black, unblinking, watching him from the dark. He didn't speak of it, just stood, watching the mist lift slowly from the ground, wondering if today would be the day a decision had to be made. The pregnant woman turned onto her side and exhaled. Something inside her had changed. Not pain, not urgency, just difference. The child she carried had begun to feel the rhythm of this new place. As sunlight threaded through the canopy, scattering golden shards across the damp ground, the others rose. No greetings, only movement, rekindling the fire, collecting dry bark, checking the snares. The elders sat near the flames, pounding bitter roots into a paste, mixing it with hot water, a crude medicine. A young woman noticed something first. Bark stripped from a nearby tree, and a strange scent in the air. The scent of flesh. Not deer, not hare. Predator. Maybe wolf, maybe hyena. Whatever it was close. The leader gathered the group. There was no rush, no panic, just time. They had stayed long enough. The ground was good, but not enough. Food was thinning, and something else had begun to approach. They began to take down the camp with practiced grace, as though performing an ancient dance, loosening ropes, rolling hides, extinguishing fire, burying the ashes. Stones once used for cooking were rearranged along the stream's edge, an old signal. We were here. One man formed a small arrow of twigs, pointing north. A child asked, "Where are we going?" An elder answered softly, "To where the earth breathes." No one needed more explanation. Among wanderers, that was enough. A place where soil was soft, water clear, trees upright, and men could walk through the woods without lowering their heads. That was a place where the earth breathed. The journey resumed, quiet and reverent. Each step pressed gently, as if the forest floor might break, every footprint a silent prayer. They moved through open woods where sunlight reached down to the roots. There, one elder found a sign, fresh boar droppings, still warm. But they didn't stop. Not today. Today was for leaving, not for hunting. At the forest's edge, they found a clearing where saplings had begun to push through the soil. A good sign, young trees meant living earth. The pregnant woman paused to press her fingers gently to one bright green leaf, as if to thank it for growing. They stopped beneath a broad tree for the midday meal. Just a few seeds, water from the stream, and the last of the fish from days past. A young man cracked stone for a new knife, his hands muddy but his eyes bright. A child brought a single white feather to the fire like treasure. No one laughed, everyone nodded. In the afternoon, they crossed a narrow stone pass where wind shrieked like a flute. An old man stopped, closed his eyes. "That sound," he whispered, "was like my mother's flute." "Maybe she hears us," someone murmured back. Before nightfall, they camped on a flat rise. One person planted 3 sticks in a triangle, a quiet symbol. If others passed, they would know. A child placed a white stone on the top. No one spoke of it, but everyone felt something settle. Night fell softly like breath. The fire was lit once more. Warmth radiated from the center. Someone began to tell a story about a distant cave marked by red handprints of ancestors. The story had no ending because they had never returned to that cave. Maybe, the storyteller said, the cave they sought today was the same one. Maybe they just hadn't seen it yet. Maybe they were meant to leave their own handprints this time. The fire crackled, children curled into each other, the elders leaned into shadow. And deep in a forest without name, beneath a moonless sky, a group of people kept walking, not just in search of shelter, but of something more. A place to be remembered, a place to call home, once again. In an age without names, with hearts that still knew hope. The 9th day began with footsteps, not from within their group, but from the trees behind them. No one saw anything, but everyone heard. A pattern, heavy, careful steps, and then silence. No words were exchanged, but after breakfast, the group changed direction. They passed through a low grove where roots curled above ground like stone arms. The children were carried. The elders leaned on sticks, but no one lagged behind. Their pace was steady, unified. There was something in the silence, not fear, but instinct, leading them forward. By midday, they reached a narrow valley nestled between two ridges. Wind whispered through the gap like a voice calling from a distance. In the center was a flat patch of earth, old ash, a ring of stones, a broken arrowhead buried in dirt. Someone had been here. A young woman bent down and lifted the fragment. She touched it with reverence, as if it held a memory, not hers, but someone's. Perhaps someone she had once known, or perhaps not. Still, she closed her fingers around it and tucked it into the leather pouch at her waist, a piece of someone else's story, now part of hers. The lead man knelt beside the stone circle, brushing away dry leaves. Beneath the layer of dust was blackened charcoal. The scent of smoke still lingered, not yesterday but not long ago. Maybe a week, maybe less. Someone else found shallow marks scratched into the rock, not deep. Could have been made by a knife or claws. Whatever it was gone now. They decided to stay the night. The fire was built again, but the shelters this time were closer together, arranged in a ring, all openings facing inward, as if to protect something invisible in their center. The children were kept near. The adults watched the shadows more than usual. At dusk, a man sat by the cliff wall and carved a symbol into the stone, a circle around 3 dots. He said nothing, but others saw, and they understood. It was a message, a marker, a warning, for someone, for anyone who might come after. The elders began to speak, not of gods or myths, but of real memory, of the time their former group accidentally wandered into another band's territory. There was no battle, but there were stairs, distance, understanding, boundaries, unspoken rules. Not everyone who lives like us is a friend, one elder said, but not every stranger is a threat either. Silence. Then a child asked, "How do we know the difference?" The elder stared into the fire and replied, "By remembering who we are." That night, no stories were told, just the wind through stone, the soft snap of burning bark, and the slow breathing of those too old to dream anymore. The pregnant woman didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening, not just for danger, but for meaning. She could feel it, something drawing closer, not just an animal, not just the cold, but a moment, a turning. The fire burned low. A child stirred in their sleep, whispering a name that didn't belong to anyone in the camp. A young man rubbed their back, humming a tune from memory, wordless, just a melody older than speech. Before dawn, someone stepped beyond the circle of firelight and stood on the rocks above the valley, looking out over mist and branches. Far in the distance, something moved. Not close, not clear, but real. No one dreamed anymore that night. And when morning came, they would move again, because that was what they did. Not to run, but to seek. To find the place that answered memory. A land that felt like listening, where footsteps didn't warn but welcomed. The 10th dawn wasn't glorious. The sun didn't burst over the horizon. It simply crept upward, diffused and hesitant, as though uncertain whether to reveal the day to the people below, still quiet beneath a veil of thinning mist. The group packed up in silence, not because something had gone wrong, but because everyone understood that today wasn't a day for words. The signs from yesterday still echoed in their minds. Another presence had passed through the place they had slept. The traces were faint, the meaning unclear, but real. And real was enough to make their movements softer, more deliberate. They turned northward, following a trail where the grass was thin and fallen leaves masked the ground. A child found a sharp animal tooth and threaded it onto a piece of leather. The tooth hung against their chest like a talisman. An elder noticed and nodded. No comment was needed. Before noon, they crossed into a strange land, an open stretch where tree roots twisted along the surface in a tangled web, circling a bare center like the basin of an ancient lake long dried. The children ran along the outer rim, but dared not step into the middle. The adults stopped too, sensing a boundary not marked by any object, but by feeling alone. A young man stepped forward, stick in one hand, the other bare. He knelt at the center, pressed his palm to the soil. No tracks, no smell, but something still. He rose and said only, "We go on." Beyond that place, the forest opened into a lowland. The trees grew thinner, shrubs taller, the air denser. They found the skeleton of a small deer, old sun-bleached bones, still holding tufts of hair. An arrow protruded from the neck. The shaft had rotted, but the flint head remained. No one took anything. They stood for a few moments and kept walking. By late afternoon, they came to a grassy rise. The wind swept across it from the east. A woman raised her hand to feel it, palm open, as though greeting a spirit. There, they stopped. Not to rest, but to see. Far off, they heard water, not the bubbling of a stream, but the weight of a river. A current strong, wide and deep. A force that marked the edge of something, perhaps a new land, perhaps one they had never entered, or one they simply no longer remembered. 3 scouts were sent forward. They carried rope, spears, and firestone. The others stayed behind, building temporary shelters, not for comfort, only for cover, just enough to shield from the rising wind. At sunset, the scouts returned. They brought no food, only a report. The river was wide, swift and cold, clear water, no bridge, but perhaps a crossing could be made farther down. One said, "Downstream there is a bend. The rocks are slick, but the bank dips low. We could pass, if we have rope and courage." A child asked, "What's on the other side?" No one answered, but in their eyes the question was heard. It became a proposition, a challenge, a chance. That night they ate in silence. Roasted roots, dried mushrooms, bitter leaf broth. It wasn't good, but it was enough. When the fire caught strong, the eldest man began to speak. Not an old tale, but a memory. The first story he had ever heard as a child, of a river that split 2 lands, one where the people lived and another where none had ever walked. One day, someone crossed, left everything behind, and when he returned, he brought nothing, only a sentence. It wasn't better over there, just different. The old man looked around the fire and said, "Tomorrow we swim." No cheers, no fear, only silence, like a vow. Not to escape, but to continue, to cross a boundary, not just of soil or water, but of the self. The morning of the 11th day began with the sound of heartbeats, not from within their chests, but in their ears, a pulsing thrum that echoed like a drum from beneath the earth. The rhythm wasn't steady, quick, then slow, uneven. No one needed to be told this was the day. The air itself had already whispered it before the sun rose. There was no real breakfast, just a few sips of water, a leftover root charred from last night's fire, a handful of ashes scattered around where they had slept, like a ritual farewell. The lead man marked a nearby tree with 3 horizontal lines and a single dot in the center. A sign for any eyes that might pass. Someone had been here, and something was worth remembering. When they left, no one looked back. The river came into view behind a stand of low trees, flashing with light like thousands of silver knives cutting across the earth. The water wasn't gentle. It wasn't violent either. It was simply present, alive, a test and a promise all at once. They stood before it for a long while, saying nothing, as if waiting for a sign, a sound, a gust of wind at the right moment. But nothing came, because the sign wasn't out there. It was inside them. The first to step into the current was a young woman, small, quiet, unshaken. She unbound her tunic, tied it tight across her chest. No one stopped her. She entered the river like someone crossing a threshold, cold, fast, pulling, but she didn't look back. She swam, not fast, not strong, but steady. At the midpoint, the current took hold. She dipped beneath the surface, then rose again. An elder placed a hand to his chest and closed his eyes. When she reached the far bank, the whole group exhaled together, as if they'd been holding breath since she took her first step. She turned, lifted her hand. No smile, just a nod. One by one they followed. Some could swim, some could not. They tied ropes, pulled one another. Children were bound to adult chests. A man carried a bundle of fire wrapped in dry bark, held high above the water like a sacred object. One child wept from the cold, another shouted from cramping legs, but no one was left behind. When the last person set foot on the far bank, the sun was fully risen, wet, shaking, spent, but standing on new earth, the land of something else. No one spoke for a long time. They just stood, listening to the water behind them. A young boy picked up a stone from the shore and held it aloft like a trophy. A woman drove her walking stick into the soil, marking the land like a banner with no flag. The new camp was modest, near the first line of trees. No one mentioned moving forward. Today was for staying, for breathing, for remembering that they had crossed something their ancestors may have once stopped before. In the afternoon, a young man walked along the riverbank. He found a stone axe, not theirs. The wooden handle had rotted, but the blade remained sharp. Perhaps someone had tried to cross and failed. Or maybe another group had once camped here and moved on. He brought it back and handed it to the eldest. The old man accepted it, met the young one's gaze, and closed his hand around it. No words were exchanged. At dusk, the fire was lit. Warmth returned like memory. The old man told the story of the first river their ancestors ever faced, where half the tribe turned back and the other half pressed on. "We are the children of those who swam," he said. The pregnant woman smiled gently, "And the child inside me is the child of those who kept going." Someone wept, not loudly, just a single tear. And on the far bank, beneath the hum of insects, the crackling of wood, and hearts slowing after the cold, they sat beside each other, not as survivors, but as openers of worlds, beyond the river, in a place unnamed, where they would be the first to give it meaning. The next morning wasn't like any before. It didn't feel like a continuation. It wasn't just another sunrise. The air was different. The soil felt younger. The trees whispered in unfamiliar accents. Everything was new. The grass seemed softer. The wind carried a sweeter scent, and the silence ran deeper. The first to wake didn't light the fire. Instead, he stood at the river's edge, gazing south, back toward the land they had left, where the cold of the crossing still tingled in the skin, but the mind had already moved far beyond it. There was no road back, and none needed. When they ate, it was without heaviness, not because their stomachs were full, but because something else had been left behind on the far shore. Fear, perhaps, or doubt, or just the weight of what had come before. The pregnant woman said she had dreamed of a cave. Its ceiling was covered in red handprints, upside down, reaching out as if someone had tried to press their being into the stone. No one laughed. An elder simply nodded. When a dream becomes that clear, he said, it's no longer just a dream. And so they moved again. No one said where to, they simply walked. Because movement was life, and life never stayed still. Across a newly opened plain where birds flew in careful lines, where stones wore moss like cloaks and insects crawled patiently across the decaying limbs of old trees. The children collected leaves they didn't recognize, grasses with strange colors, seeds hard as stone. The adults tested unfamiliar roots, sniffed, cracked, tasted. Some were kept, others tossed immediately. Every step was a lesson, every plant a question. Near midday, they reached a rise in the land, a small hill crowned with a circle of stones, not tall, not wide, but unmistakably shaped by human hands, not theirs, not recent, but not ancient either. A man stepped forward and laid his hand on the central stone. Warmth still lingered, as if the sun had not yet erased the presence of those who came before. A young one stepped into the circle, sat, closed his eyes, not to pray, not to sleep, but to feel. What was he feeling? No one asked, but no one moved. When he opened his eyes again, he said only, "We are not the first to stand here, but we may be the last to understand why it matters." They left the stones undisturbed, took nothing, changed nothing. The grass behind them slowly rose, erasing their footprints. By afternoon they came upon a dry stream bed, its rocks cracked by time or weather, but hidden within a narrow crevice water still flowed, thin, clear, quiet, like a whisper. They gathered around it, drawing water with cupped hands, with hollowed roots, with bark folded into bowls. A child washed their face and laughed, a sound not heard in days. It spread quickly. Adults laughed too, not for long, but long enough. Long enough to remember they were still human. As the sun dipped lower, they found a natural shelter, a slab of rock jutting from the hill, shaped by wind or water long ago. Not a cave, but enough. They made fire just outside, no longer fearing beasts, no longer worrying about strangers. Only peace remained. The elder shared a tale that every time a group crossed a boundary, their ancestors followed, not to guide, but to watch. And if they do not interfere, he said, then we are on the right path. That night, the wind was gentle. No one stayed awake from fear. No one dreamt of danger. Before sleep, the pregnant woman placed her hand on her belly. "You will not be born in a cave," she whispered. "You will be born beneath the sky." And as the stars gathered over the quiet figures huddled beneath the stone overhang, the universe did not speak. But it was listening, and perhaps it smiled. On the 13th morning, it wasn't birdsong that woke them, nor sunlight. It was the sense, deep, quiet, undeniable, that something was approaching. A stirring in the air, a backward gust. A scent they didn't recognize, mixed with sap and damp earth untouched by their feet. The first to open his eyes didn't move. He simply listened, felt. The forest was breathing differently today. Not danger, but urgency. A kind of invitation. The group rose slowly. No rush. They ate little. Roasted roots, soft berries, cold water from yesterday's spring, but their minds were already elsewhere. All eyes turned to a narrow path where the trees thinned and light filtered through like a gate of gold. When they began walking, no one asked where they were headed, but their steps were sure. A child took an elder's hand, not in fear, but readiness. Something was waiting. They passed through tall grass that brushed their legs like parting palms. Birds took flight, not startled, just making space. By midday, they arrived at a natural hollow where the trees opened into a wide clearing. In the center stood a wooden frame, tall and deliberate, made from crisscrossed branches. At its peak, spiral feathers spun gently in the wind. Someone whispered, "This is a gathering place." Not theirs, but someone's. Someone like them. They didn't rush forward. An invisible boundary formed between them and the structure. The adults stood still, the children whispered. The wind carried distant rhythms, wood on wood, stone on stone, or hands drumming trees. No figures appeared. A young man, not a leader, stepped out. He walked toward the wooden frame. He stopped a few paces short, bowed his head, and knelt. Said nothing, just listened. Then he stood. "They're not here," he said, "but they left something, for whoever dares to arrive." Cautiously the group approached. Beneath the wooden structure lay a flat stone slab. On it, 3 handprints in black charcoal, circles carved carefully around each palm. A woman began to cry, not from sadness, from recognition. It had been so long since they'd seen proof, clear, human, of someone else. Someone who painted, someone who left messages, someone who waited. A child sat beside the stone, placed their hand over one of the prints, smaller, but the shape aligned like time folding into itself. They stayed all afternoon, didn't touch, didn't analyze, just watched, just listened. At dusk, they made their camp far from the frame. They didn't build a fire near it. They didn't disturb the silence. They honored it. An elder said softly, "If they once sat here, they did what we are doing now." That was enough. They didn't need to meet, didn't need to speak. Knowing was enough. They were not alone. They were not the only ones who looked up at the sky and wondered. Before sleep, a young voice asked, "If we keep going, is someone coming from the other way, finding this place like we did?" The elder smiled. "Maybe, and they will understand us too, not with words, with the heart." That night an owl called from far away. Insects sang beneath stone. Wind tapped gently at the frame like a lullaby. And in each of them, though none said it aloud, they knew. They had entered a story larger than themselves. They were no longer wandering shadows. They were continuers, keepers of fire, those who would leave handprints of their own. On the morning of the 14th day, the sun didn't rise slowly. It surged, as if the world could no longer wait. Light poured through the forest, sweeping across leaves like fire searching for passage. The birds didn't fly. They glided. The wind didn't blow. It pulled. The air carried a strange certainty. Something was approaching, not from ahead, but from within. Their footsteps weren't heavier, but they landed deeper. The ground gave a little with each step, like it was choosing to remember them. An elder murmured, "Today, the earth remembers us." They entered a low forest where the trees weren't tall, but their roots rose like veins through the skin of the world. On many trunks, there were carvings, not clear but repeating, 3 vertical lines and a circle, not theirs, but familiar. A young one pressed his hand to a mark, eyes closed. When he opened them, he whispered, "They passed here too, and they wanted us to know." No one laughed, no one questioned. Today was a day of memory. By midday, they arrived at a shallow basin, scattered with round stones. In the center, a fire pit, circular, lined with blackened rock. No flames, but the scent of old smoke lingered, like a breath held too long. One knelt and lifted a tiny bone, dark, polished, not animal, a human finger bone. There was no fear, only stillness. The pregnant woman spoke gently. "No one dies alone if their ashes remain." They made camp beside the pit, not to claim, but to keep a promise, that those who once paused here would not be forgotten. That night the fire burned between 2 circles, the living and those who had lived. The elder told a story with no names, no heroes, only acts, lighting flames, weaving baskets, sharpening stone, nursing the sick, burying the lost. And each action was a thread in the cloth of memory. A child asked, "Why did they leave bones?" The elder stared into the flames. "Because they knew someone would find them." The wind looped around the stone pit, creating whispers, not words, but echoes, not strange, but familiar. The youngest stood up, left the fire's warmth, and stepped to the edge of the pit. He pulled a small stone from his pocket and placed it gently on the ash. "I don't know who's here," he said, "but I will leave a part of myself too." No one stopped him, no one suggested, but one by one the others followed. Elders, adults, children, each brought something: a pebble, a leaf, a strand of hair, a broken spear tip, a loop of cord, not to worship, not to name, but to say, "We came and we understand." When the fire dimmed, no more stories were told, no songs were sung, only silence remained. But not emptiness. It was full, full like a river before the flood, held just at the edge of breaking. They slept side by side, not by family, not by age, but by heartbeat. And when the moon rose high, casting silver light through the trees, it struck each offering beside the pit, but it did not reflect. It dissolved, as if the night itself had reached down and touched every piece, the living, the dead, those still to come. And for one breathless moment, the world was whole again, without separation. The 15th morning came without reason. No strange noise woke them, no alarm. Just one by one each opened their eyes, almost in unison, and they knew. Today marked the end of a journey, not a conclusion, a turning point, where an old story folded so a new one could begin. No one said it aloud, but every breath, every shared glance carried the truth. They ate a quiet, simple meal. Slowly, without urgency. Someone whispered thanks to the last root in their hand. Another tucked a strange leaf behind their ear, like a farewell. As light spilled across the forest floor, one stood and said, "We have walked farther than those before us." Another answered, "But distance isn't what matters. It's how we remember." There were no rituals, only action. They scattered across the woods, each choosing a place. A tree root, a stone face, a patch of light. There they left something behind, a branch tied with twine, a symbol carved in bark, a circle of pebbles spiraling inward, not for others to find, but for themselves, to mark that, once, they had belonged to this land. The pregnant woman found a flat stone. She pressed both hands upon it, then, using clay from her pouch, left her prints behind. Her heart beat slowly, and the child inside her remained still, as if listening. When all returned to the clearing, no one counted, because presence wasn't measured by number anymore, but by connection. Together, they walked a final stretch, to a hill, not a mountain, that rose gently from the trees. At the top, the land opened wide. Beyond, a new forest, shimmering waters, unwalked ground. No one said, "We continue." No one said, "We stay," because choice no longer lived in words, but in being. A young voice spoke, "If we wake tomorrow and don't see each other, don't be afraid. We've already lived this journey together." An elder smiled at the sky, as if speaking to ancestors. "We have not let you fade in vain." Before night they lit a final fire, not for warmth, not for food, but to call the earth and sky to witness. They didn't sing, but someone began tapping 2 stones in rhythm with their heartbeat. Another clapped softly. A child danced around the flames, eyes closed, smiling. No one stopped her. The fire rose tall, as if reaching for the stars now appearing above. And in that light, their faces came alive, no longer wanderers or survivors or seekers, but carriers of memory, the ones who had crossed the river, buried their hands in the soil, listened to wind, learned that death isn't an end, and life isn't just a goal. That night, as flames died down and stars crowded the sky, they lay down together. No promises, no farewells, because the truth was, there was no parting. Some paths split only to converge later. Some memories go quiet just to return louder. And some people, like them, leave no names. but leave pieces of themselves in the eternal current of life, a handprint in stone, a footstep in forest loam, a fire that still burns in someone else's chest. None of them vanished. They dissolved into the world, like seeds into earth, waiting to rise again when someone else one day decides to begin walking. Thank you for walking this journey with me, not just across forests, rivers, and time, but deep into something within ourselves. Because when we truly listen to the past, we begin to understand the present in ways we never imagined. If something in this story made you pause, made you think about our ancestors, about what it means to be human, then follow this channel. There are many more stories waiting, stories not just to hear, but to live through. I'll see you in the next telling. But for now, let the fire continue to burn inside you. Follow for more.